Move on now, and queue jumpers who pay 50 Rand bribes to SASSA officials are among the pet peeves of recipients of the Social Relief of Distress SRD grant. That's according to the research from the human rights organization Black Sash. The organization has launched a report on the lived experiences of people applying for and receiving the grant. Black Sash Executive Director Rachel Bukasa joins us now live to tell us more about these findings. Rachel, before we take a look at some of the more disparaging findings, surely some people must have appreciated this distress grant.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely, more than some people. That's why you'll see that the report is titled, it's a lifeline, but it's not enough. So the understanding being that it's absolutely crucial to people who've received it. They are really grateful, and essentially it's a lifeline. It's not something that is sort of a by the way kind of thing, but it's something that has proven to be central to them. And so our report, the findings of the report comes from that basis. So not from a basis of criticizing its usefulness or its impact, no, but rather because it's been such a lifeline, and these are now the issues identified as part of that.
What are the most people spending, the recipients, what are they mostly spending that 350 Rand on?
So a lot of the cost comes firstly in getting the grant itself. So the transport to, the transport from, because unfortunately you'll know that with the way things are structured, it's not like you can normally get it in one day. At times you go, you queue the whole day, and then what then transpires is that either the post office runs out of funds and you have to come back another day, or the system is down, etc. So already before you get the grant, there's already that expenditure that comes down. And then what we find that a lot of people use it for is to subsidize food at home. For a lot of people who don't have food or households, what they do is that your 350, my 350, and someone else's 350 makes enough for at least the basics of the bare basics in terms of groceries. The other high expenditure we found in terms of that is people use it to job hunt in the formal sector, or formal and informal. So whether it's transport to attend interviews, or it's data costs to be able to apply online for a job, or get a CV together by using an internet cafe. Those are the kinds of expenditures that are done. Of course, for mothers as well, we found that particularly the women, they use a lot of it also to pay for some ECD education costs for their young babies, for someone to look after the child.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the not so pleasant comments coming through from your research. And it's corruption, it's long queues. You take it from there.
Yeah, so I think there's, as you say, there's quite a lot of challenges around the implementation of the grant, and particularly access. One of the key findings being the issues around access, or lack thereof, in the sense that there's very little information that people have with regards to how this gets done. So people are not clear on how you apply, and when you get a no, there isn't a clear process around appeals. And so what essentially people do is now rely on each other to be able to get that information. So if my neighbor got it, I try to figure out what they did and communicate like that, and see why I didn't get rejected. So firstly, the lack of information is a big thing. Secondly, the lack of dignity that exists in some of these most of these collection points, in fact, where there are long queues but there are not chairs for the elderly. There are long queues but there aren't bathrooms. We have scenarios in KZN where it's just an open field across the road where women, children, all of them have to urinate in public because there aren't bathrooms made available. And come rain or shine, it's not like there's something on top of you, let alone when you get rejected, you don't know where to go for an appeal, and if you make a mistake. So the things that go wrong with regard to the application process are just really, the process is really frustrating and really difficult for people in it.
When we look at access, you're saying it's a problem. So one has to worry about, are the right people, the people that are really in need of the grant, are they able to access the grant? And, is that a problem? Are we finding that it's getting to the people that really, really need it?
the problem, in fact, is that it is getting to the people that really need it. But I think the way the systems are structured currently, it's the people that really need it are getting excluded. So, for example, one of the biggest issues we have consistently had across board has been the issue that government systems are not up to date. So the UIFs, the SARS, it's not up to date. And so it reflects a certain amount of money, for example, that actually in reality the person doesn't have. And so we find that someone who is really qualifying for this grant doesn't get it. And so when this grant first came into being, the threshold was around just under 600 Rand in order to be able to get the grant. Now the government has passed new regulations, I think end of last month, saying that now you need to be poorer than poor. So now if you have 350 in your account at any time during the month or the total of it, you no longer qualify. And so that is a problem, because if at some stage we had decided that X category of people are poor enough to be deserving of the grant, how are we now deciding that we can only give to the poor of those poor? What happened to those people who were now relying on this grant for the last 2 years? What do we do with them?
Rachel, you also mentioned problems with the food parcels, some calling it a scam. Why?
Look, we found that there's been a lot of corruption. There's been a lot of fraud around this issue of food parcel. It doesn't necessarily get to who it needs to get to. And also the problem with food parcels also is that it's given and then there's no sense of when you get the next one, and also doesn't take into account some household realities. So for example, where there are people that are sick or where there are little children, that it's just the bare basics that necessarily don't work. And then we found also there are some issues around corrupt officials also being able selling these things, and it's not free, doesn't essentially get to where it needs to get. And so that struggle is really difficult. So food parcel is one thing, but what about the rest of someone's life? How do we secure dignity aside from that? Because there's more than just the bare minimum of food that requires for someone to live a dignified life.
So, Rachel, the grant is working, is reaching people, but more can be done more efficiently and better. Basically, that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think we would have said that definitely up until last month. But with the new regulation that's been passed, now that we've moved from the state of disaster into a legislated peace through the Social Assistance Act, we find that we've actually now gone really backwards. We've gone backwards and are now putting millions of lives in jeopardy for the people that can no longer access this.
Okay. Rachel Bukasa, the Black Sash Executive Director, talking to us about the research they conducted very recently, actually, within the last few weeks or so, finding there were problems, but also, I suppose, a few positive remarks coming out of it as well.